Hello and welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am of course your host Rob Burgess. On this our 55th episode, our guest is Asia McClain Chapman. Asia McClain Chapman will be familiar to fans of the first season of the Serial podcast. If you haven't listened to that yet, you should probably go back and listen to it before hearing this episode. It will make a lot more sense. Last year she released her book, Confessions of a Serial Alibi, which tells the story of her journey from ordinary library patron to a key alibi witness for Adnan Syed. In the book, McClain discusses everything from her memories of Woodlawn High School to her conversations with several key individuals such as Adnan Syed, Rabia Chaudry, Justin Brown, Gary Proctor, and former state's prosecutor Kevin Urick. Asia McClain Chapman was born on June 26, 1981, in Inglewood, California. Her parents, Carl and Michele McClain, were separated in 1986, resulting in her relocation to Baltimore, Maryland. After growing up in Baltimore County school system, Asia graduated from Woodlawn High School in 1999 and proceeded to college. In search of a fresh start, Asia made the decision to drive across the country in 2005. After several years of living in Portland, Oregon, and working full-time as a personal assistant, Asia met her now husband, Philip Chapman, in 2008. The couple married in 2009, and they are now proud parents of 3 rambunctious little boys, Lucas, Alexander, and Ethan Chapman. Located in Spokane, Washington, Asia spends her days as a stay-at-home mother, board secretary of Solutions Automation, and small business owner of Diamond Concepts. In addition to her commitments to her businesses, Asia enjoys web designing, writing, cooking, gardening, and working with her hands, in addition to participating in events with her local Moms Club chapter and church. And now on to the show.
Please announce yourself.
Rob Burgess.
Hello, Rob.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm pretty good. Did you get your taxes done?
No, I'm still doing them. I have a whole slew of things I'm doing today. I just totally got in the zone, you know.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if you want to just go ahead and start out by just letting people know whatever you want them to know about you here to start out with.
Oh, I didn't realize we were actually on the show.
Oh, yeah.
Well, as you know, I'm actually a key alibi witness in the Adnan Syed case that's currently being fought out in court right now. I went to high school with Adnan Syed and Haman Lee back in 1999, and just through a wacky turn of events, I happened to be in the same place at the same time that the state has since argued that Adnan committed his murder. And thanks to Sarah Koenig and the creation of the Serial podcast, I became enlightened to a lot of case details that I had no previous knowledge of, and like many of everyone else in the world, I was captivated by a lot of the case details, and it influenced me to come forward with the information that I attempted to present back in 1999. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much it. And
right.
Since that time, we've been back in court arguing issues regarding ineffective assistance of counsel. And right now, the state and the defense team are basically duking it out, going back and forth with their appeals, trying, to establish whether or not we're going to have an actual retrial or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was a pretty good summation of everything. What was it like to grow up in Baltimore? I know you don't live there anymore, but to people that have never been there, how would you describe kind of the area and stuff?
Baltimore is an interesting city. We have a lot of racial and cultural diversity. Where Woodlawn High School is located, it's kind of a strange area because technically Woodlawn is considered a Baltimore County school. But the city-county line is obviously not a straight line that goes through the city. So it kind of bends and weaves, and the area where Woodlawn is located, for all intensive purposes, it might as well be in Baltimore City because you have areas right around the corner from it that are considered the county, and areas around the other side of it that are considered the city. With the Baltimore education system, you do have county schools and city schools. And back when we were growing up, county schools tended to be a little bit better as far as having more academic programs and receiving more money from the state. So they were looked at as a little bit better schools. As far as growing up in Baltimore, like I said, that was also pretty interesting because of the different back then in the county culture versus the city culture. You know, a lot of people that lived in Baltimore County, where I grew up, were Black, Arab, Asian, and Jewish. And so it was interesting because in the city you tend to have a higher solely Black population, and then the further you get into the city, you tend to get into more lower income housing and neighborhoods. And so growing up in Baltimore as a county kid, as we would say, you were always torn between two different kinds of environments. You know, the suburb, seemingly more safe neighborhoods versus the lower income, more crime populated neighborhoods. And so Woodlawn was just kind of right in the middle, on the cusp of the city. So that was a different experience from what a lot of people who lived deeper into the county, that had less experience or less proximity to the city.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I've heard it described as a hyper-segregated city. It just seems like it's kind of, there's the really, really low-income parts, and then there's the pretty nice places too, but they're not in the same places from what it sounds like here. So.
Exactly. So the further east you go, like more towards downtown, it tends to get a little bit more rough, and the more west you go, the more you're going to be in the more suburban areas that have more money. And so, like, where we grew up was just like smack in the middle of all of that. So, even within my own neighborhood, the further west you went, the more you went into, the higher income neighborhoods, like the Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods, and in fact, the middle school that Hay and I attended was Pikesville Middle School, and back then that neighborhood was basically all Orthodox Jewish. So it just, like you said, it was a very polarizing city. It still is, but the I guess you could say the lines have moved a little bit as far as income levels, so it's not the same as when I lived there.
Right. Now, the people at the center of this story you were obviously connected with somehow, but from your letters, it doesn't sound like you knew Hay or Adnan that well. It's just kind of more like acquaintances. Is that right?
Exactly. I didn't know them personally, but growing up, and even till this day, I have a group of best friends, 6 people that I have carried with me from elementary school, a couple from middle school until now, into our 30s, and back in high school, a lot of those key individuals were involved in the magnet program, so they had a lot of the same classes with Hay and Adnan. In addition, I was also a high school athlete, and so just in that environment alone, we crossed paths on multiple occasions, after school or, games, pep rallies, things of that nature, during practices when the sports let out for the afternoon. So we all knew each other, but as far as personal opinions, I didn't know them on that level. But there were often social situations where, we interacted with one another, things, like I said, games, after-school activities, dances, proms. I just never had an opportunity to engage in personal contact, like phone calls, and where I really got to know them.
What about Jay? Were you close to him at all, or?
No, he was even a little bit less unknown to me, mainly because he was an upperclassman to the 3 of us. So he was a little older.
But he wasn't in the magnet program either, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he wasn't in the magnet program. So even though I wasn't in the magnet program, but like I said, all of my best friends were. So I was like an honorary magnet kid because, I was always with them and in that circle anyway. Even though I didn't have the same classes. So.
Right. And then how did you find out what happened to Hay, or kind of get word of what was happening when it first was all going down there?
Well, just the rumor mill of typical high school. You come to school one day and someone's missing and everyone's gossiping about where she might have went. And then a few weeks later, between the rumor mill of high school and on the news, everybody knew what happened. Or I wouldn't say what happened, but as far as her body being found.
Right. And then from your letters, it seems like it was kind of a split opinion about what people thought about Adnan, if he was guilty or not. Is that kind of how you saw it? Just kind of some people thought he was guilty and some people didn't?
Oh, yeah. You had people who were closer in the friendship circle between Hay and Adnan that, had their polarizing opinions as well. There were people who, and I wouldn't even, when I think about it, I wouldn't even say that, when people talked about it, him being arrested, it wasn't, I never heard anyone say like, oh, I think he killed her for this, because of this reason, or like, it was just more so people who didn't know him that had a blanket opinion, basically, well, there has to be a good reason why they're still holding him. There has to be a reason why he's still in jail. Something's going on if he's still being held by the police, that kind of sentiment. And then there were people who knew him that couldn't believe it. And then there were people such as myself who couldn't make heads or tails of the situation because I didn't know him good enough to really have a personal opinion on whether I thought he was capable. And I wasn't going to try to talk out of both sides of my neck and say, oh, well, he probably did it or something of that nature, because I didn't know him well enough to make have an opinion.
Right. Well, and then I'm sure some people had like confirmation bias going on, and they were kind of confirming what they already believed about him to start with. You know what I mean? So it's like if you already thought he was a good guy, it's like I can't believe he did this. And then you had
the situation where the police were beginning to conduct student interviews, and so some of the questioning was being leaked back into the student population via rumors, and then the old game of telephone. So, by the time someone who actually was engaged in a police interview came back with their story and their experience, by the time it got to someone like me who knows, how contorted the description of the experience and the questions from the police could have been. So.
Right. So did people's perceptions change over time then as the kind of trial and the investigations and things happen?
Well, I never followed the trial. Just back then, I mean, if we're all adults. If you try to think back to your senior year in high school, in the summer and the fall that followed, you're typically focused on moving forward and becoming an adult and going off to college, those kind of things. So I never followed the trial, but just the general consensus. Consensus that I got from my friends and just people who knew them, it just kind of seemed like everyone assumed there must have been proper reasoning for him to remain in jail and his conviction. I'm not even entirely sure if I have friends that attended the trial. I'm sure I do, but it was such a sore topic of discussion. It's not something that me and my friends continued to talk about.
Right.
When you think about it, that's for many of us, that's the first experience that we ever had with murder and malice and someone that we know being convicted and even arrested of something so heinous. So even to this day, it's not something that me and my friends talk about, even with all the media. I think me and my best friends have probably discussed it once when I actually was there for the post-conviction hearing.
Right.
And, we didn't even talk about details. They just wanted to know how I was doing. But, they don't want to talk about the death of their friend and the incarceration of another friend.
Yeah, I can imagine. That makes sense to me.
So
yeah.
It's just one of those things where, people, it's sad to say, but people moved on. And it just became, because we were 17 and we were so young, we just trusted the criminal justice system, and we assumed that there had to be good reasons.
Right. Now, when you wrote those two letters in March of '99, you visited with his family before you did that, and was that because you kind of realized, oh, wait a second, me seeing him at the library actually means something in this case? Was that kind of the way it went?
Yeah. So what happened is, I ended up having a discussion with my ex. He was a classmate of mine, and in a class, and I ended up telling him what I remembered, and he said to me, you should really think about telling the family. And I said, I'm not going to bother. It was a few minutes. And he said, no, from what I understand, the police, they're looking for information. The family's looking for information. It may be nothing, but I'm going over to the family's house tonight just to show my support. I can come pick you up and take you with me, and you can tell them what you know. I said, okay, fine. And so we went over there, and I told the family what I knew. They thanked me for the information. As I recall, they explained to me that there was they were in the process, or the police, or I don't know if it was the police, the attorney, or the family themselves, or even Adnan.
Right.
But someone was in the process of putting a timeline together of of the day that Hay went missing. And I can only assume in order to place Adnan's whereabouts. And so it had been explained to me that from 2:15 when school let out to about 8 o'clock, they were trying to put together the timeline for that window of time. And so when I told the family about the scene Adnan, I don't even think that they, could appreciate the significance, because at the time we had no idea of the timeline that the state was arguing as far as the time of the murder, the time of death. And so my experience with him was only a 15 to 20 minute situation. So it was just kind of like, okay, well, you're looking to put a timeline together. Well, I can contribute this 15 to 20 minutes. It's not much, but I know that's when I saw him. And, no one thought really anything of it, I don't believe. And so when I came home, I was just so shaken by the experience, I decided to write Adnan a letter, and in the letter, I made sure to mention that I had spoken with the family, and that I remember seeing him on this day, and the reason that I actually put that in the letter was in the event that the family did not communicate to him that I had provided that information. I wanted to make sure that he had that information.
Right. Now,
so that if it was important, he would know to have his attorneys reach out to me.
Right.
And when I never heard anything back, naturally I just assumed that, 15 to 20 minutes was inconsequential to the situation, in itself. So.
Yeah. Well, no, that was my next question, because I was going to ask you if you were surprised that no one ever followed up with you during the first couple trials.
No, I mean, think about how many times you run into someone that you met at a party through another friend at a Starbucks or something like that. You're not going to think that, this person, someone died on this day, and that 15, to 20-minute conversation that you had with that person is important. So when no one ever called me, I just assumed that it was a 15 to 20-minute time that was insignificant, and they didn't need to document that time,
Right. Now, jumping forward a little bit, the thing that you testified at this last year here, they tried to say something about the second letter wasn't actually written on the day that it said it was. Was that a thing that they were trying to prove?
Yeah, they tried to. I don't know. That was just odd.
Yeah, I don't understand what they were getting at with that exactly.
From what I understand, what I've heard from people, like on Twitter and things of that nature, is that there is a I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words. There's a group of individuals that put these conspiracy theories together, and one of the conspiracy theories is that the second letter that I wrote was somehow backdated, and that it was written later, a few weeks later, and that that I'm somehow a part of a ploy to provide a false alibi, and that the letter was something that was requested of me from Adnan, and that was perpetrated later and backdated to serve as an alibi. I don't know. It's all bizarre to me.
Well, it doesn't even make sense, because the first letter. Yeah. You're saying that basically the same things as in the first letter, which they're not disputing. So I don't understand what good. It doesn't add up to me. But
I don't know. The internet. It's a weird.
The internet. Yes, I will agree with that.
The second letter was just a follow-up to the first, because after I went to school and the gossip got to me, I had additional questions, and so it's just this is a 17-year-old kid, trying to find out what's truth and what's gossip, and just having additional questions. I actually had a mailbox. My house used to be the second house from the corner on the street where I lived, and on the corner was a blue mailbox. And so, every day, if I, well, not every day, but if I caught the school bus, or every day that I left my house, at some point I'm passing that mailbox. So it's not like, it's not hard to imagine that, writing a letter one day, leaving out the house and dropping it in the mailbox and writing another letter the next day. I don't understand why so many people find that to be bizarre, especially when you're thinking about the mindset of a 17-year-old girl.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Now, kind of after the conviction, Rabia Chaudry had, at her request, you wrote an affidavit kind of saying the same things you'd said in the letter. And then years later, I'm going off of what I heard in Serial, so correct me if I get any of this wrong, Adnan's new lawyer hired a private investigator, and then I guess your fiance at the time said you weren't interested in talking, and then you had called one of the prosecutors.
Yeah, he was actually my husband.
Oh, he was your husband, okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'd only been married for a few months.
Ah, okay.
He was approached by the private detective.
Right.
And I instructed him to, gather the contact information and tell them that I would follow up.
Okay.
And let the person know that he would get in contact with me with that, And so, just, again, still being in a younger mindset, not knowing what I know today and not being experienced in the criminal justice system, I made the mistake of reaching out to someone. The only person that I could think of that I thought was going to be a more neutral party. And looking back, of course, I can do nothing but shake my head and hit myself, because I know now that prosecutors are certainly not neutral, even in the face of truth and justice.
Sure, absolutely. So when you had called them, though, did you say that they had pressure? I mean, was that was the pressure being applied to you to write that? Is that what happened?
Know what was going on? Why these people were reaching out to me? Was the case was the case back in court for some reason? Why after all that time would someone spend money to send someone clear across the country to try to locate me?
And this was years after the fact, right? This was how long was this? What year was that?
This is 10 years later.
Yeah, it's that would freak me out too. I understand that. Yeah. So.
And so, at the time, I want to say Google was still fairly new, and because I remember after he gave me the contact information, I remember getting on the internet and trying to I don't know if it was Google that I used, but trying to use search engines to find anything out, about the case. And all I could find were old Baltimore Sun articles, and it was during that time that I ended up seeing the prosecutor's name, and got the harebrained idea to give him a call and ask him the question to determine, if I needed to call the defense attorney or what was going on, because apparently. I didn't know this until last year, but the private investigator was supposed to had a letter for me explaining what was going on, but because my husband merely took her information and said that he knew me, he could get her information to me, she did not provide him with a letter or a copy of that letter. So, all I had was literally Justin Brown's business card, and so, which is the new defense attorney. So I had no idea why they were reaching out to me.
Interesting. Now, in 2012, the Kevin Urick told you not to testify at the post-conviction hearing. Was that right? Or what was that? I'm not going to come out and say that he told me not to testify, but he gave me information that definitely influenced my decision to not contact them and not get involved. Okay. And he did express to me his own personal opinions in addition to trial details, or shall I say,
details that he perceived to be, that he not perceived, but there were things that he made seem as though they were evidence and truth about the case and the trial that I know now are not true or not true in their entirety, if that makes any sense.
Oh, no, I mean, he's trying to prosecute a case. I mean, that's his job, is to,
Exactly.
Prove what he's trying to prove, not necessarily to get at the truth of it. So,
And you can influence, you can make someone think, and you can take someone down a particular road of thought.
Sure.
Without ever saying specific words. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
You can say, oh, we found DNA at the crime scene, but you could negate to mention that the DNA was never tested.
Yes,
and
that's
so the person you're
yeah.
talking to is thinking, oh, well, they found dude's DNA at the crime scene. Oh, that's a done deal,
Right, exactly. So after Serial aired, you wrote a new affidavit in 2015. Was that just to kind of nail everything down after the story was out there?
Well, I mean, especially after hearing about the Kevin Urick testimony at the post-conviction hearing, that flabbergasted me, because I never even knew that he testified during the first post-conviction hearing. So you can imagine how I felt hearing him relay a conversation to the court and describe it in a manner that was completely inaccurate. And then with the way that Serial was produced, they ended the series without explaining a lot of information, because things were happening in real time. And plainly put, I didn't give my permission to release certain information, because I was trying to find legal representation, because things were getting really out of control at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't quite sure of what my rights and responsibilities were. So, there's much to be explained about the reason why Serial ended the way that it did, and it was just mainly because there were things that were being purposely held back just for integrity's sake. And that's one thing that I do commend Sarah on. She's very she's a very ethical journalist, and if when she says things are off the record, they maintain themselves as being off the record.
Yeah, I remember one episode where it was just all a bunch of rumors, but she didn't let it slip any of the things, like person one and person two, and you know what I mean. She was very careful to not let certain details slip. So that is good.
And so after I found out about the whole the Kevin Urick, I mean, this was literally I was trying to find a lawyer to ask questions literally probably about 2 to 3 days before the last episode aired. And so I wasn't able to find a lawyer until after that. So there were things that were not put in the final episode just because I was uncomfortable with certain information being released on that scale, because Serial had already went viral. And I didn't want to do anything that was going to jeopardize the integrity.
Sure.
But yeah, so after, because I was educated a lot from listening to Serial myself, because I never followed the case. And I didn't know what happened at the post-conviction hearing, so I didn't know that Kevin Urick was involved, and that he had testified about my conversation with him. I didn't know how he testified and the inaccuracy of that situation. So, I mean, I was angry when I heard about it. It's one thing to have someone tell an untruth about you, and it's another thing for that person to tell the whole world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I didn't like the way that the situation had been painted, because, like I said, there was a lot of information that was not presented. It kind of skewed the story, in my opinion, and I was upset because I had no idea the impact of my lack of testimony. And so, of course, I wanted to do the right thing, knowing what I had found out. And so the first thing I did was have a conversation with my husband, of course, because the story had went so viral and was so popular, you can't get involved with something like that without it affecting your family. So my first course of action was to have a conversation with my husband. Talk it over with him, and we made the decision together that we were going to reach out and, get the information out on the table so that they could do whatever they needed to do with it, present it to a judge so we could, actually get all of the information out. And so that's when I obtained my own counsel and began drafting a new affidavit so that information could become officially on the record. Unlike back in 1999 when I was never contacted.
Yeah. And then when you did finally testify at the post-conviction relief hearing last year, what did that feel like to finally get your story out there? I'm sure that was a long time coming.
Well, that was crazy.
Yeah.
I remember being in Baltimore and being scared to go anywhere because the case was, especially in Baltimore, it was so popular that I didn't know. And in fact, I actually did have people that actually come up to me in a restaurant. And so I was very uneasy the whole time I was there. Just because, I'm not experienced with this type of attention. And so it was very nerve-wracking to fly to Baltimore and testify. But, ultimately I felt it was the right thing to do because, at the end of the day, there is a person's life at stake, and there is... hey, we need to know without a shadow of a doubt who's responsible and what actually happened,
Right. Now, are you going to have to testify
ever
again?
Possible at this point.
Yeah, it's so long after the fact. I mean, this would have been helpful years ago, of course. But are you going to have to testify coming up if there is a new trial? Do you know, or?
Well, that just depends. I'm not really privy to the defense argument. I'm not really buddy-buddy with the state of Maryland at this point. I think they kind of hate me. So I don't know. I would assume so. But it really just depends on what kind of argument the state has. If they choose to change the time of death, then my experience with the non is insignificant because it's back to being a 15 to 20-minute time period that just fills in the space on the timeline. If the time of death is not changed and that is the argument going forward, then of course that's going to conflict with that argument because, physics says you can't be in the same place, two different places at the same time. So, it just really depends on what the lawyers want to do going forward.
Right.
All I can do is make myself available to the state and the defense and tell the truth about what I know.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you're basically the impetus for the entire Serial podcast. Just basically, when Sarah Koenig reached out to you, that seemed like it was kind of the spark that, lit it off. How has your life changed since this all happened? I can't imagine what it must be like to be the center of the most popular podcast of all time.
It's been a crazy, crazy roller coaster. Full of new experiences, some positive and some very negative. It's definitely tested my mettle and thickened my skin. I'm a little bit smarter and I'm a little bit stronger for it. At the end of the day, I would not take the experience back because it's beyond me. It's more than just me. It's about the murder of someone who was a truly sweet individual, someone who had a lot of promise, who did not in any way, shape, or form deserve their fate. And it's about a young man that may or may not be innocent, of the crime. And so, when I'm 80, 90 years old and I look back, I want to look back on this experience knowing that I did the right thing. I can't control the ethics of the Attorney General's office. I can't control the argument of the defense. I don't know if Adnan is guilty or innocent, so all I can do is continue to shout my experience and what I know as loud as I can, and hope to God that someone actually is listening this time.
Yeah. Now, I was, of course, listening to this from afar, and, when it first came out, I was, it was a great deal of entertainment to me, but I listened back to it now, and I kind of, felt bad about feeling so, enthralled about it. I mean, it's a well-told story, of course, but at the same time, it's like you said, there's a murder of a teenage girl at the center of this. So do you think there's something sick or wrong about people taking entertainment out of this, even though it's after the fact? I mean, what's your take on that?
I don't, only because, like you said, the story was so well put together. I mean, I myself was captivated by it.
Right.
I listened to the first 2 episodes, kind of freaked out. My husband told me to just walk away, and I couldn't. And it took some time, but I came back and I binge watched. Well,
it's like a TV show. That's funny you say that. It is kind of like a TV show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I listened to the remainder of the podcast myself in about 8 hours. And so from a storytelling perspective, Sarah did an excellent job. So I don't think there's anything wrong about people enjoying it from an entertainment perspective. What I do think is wrong is when people forget that it's real life, that these are real people. What I do think is wrong is when I talk to people about it and they refer to Hay or Adnan or myself as a character.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's wrong. But I mean, error is human nature.
Sure.
So what can you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when did you start thinking about writing your own book about the case? Because this is only one of 2 books that's out. The other one's, of course, by Rabia Chaudry. And have you read her book?
Yeah. Well, it was sometime after, when we were preparing for the post-conviction hearing, and the stress of having to go to Baltimore began to mount on me. I started actually writing a journal because at the time I was being instructed to, not to talk to the media, not to talk to anyone about the case, because everyone wanted to make sure that what I had to say was well and properly documented. And like I said, the internet is a crazy place.
Yep.
And so I didn't really have anyone to talk to about the situation except for my husband, because like I said, my best friends, they don't want to talk about it because it's a negative experience. My mom, she still to this day doesn't quite understand. And, my husband, God save him, he got tired of hearing me complain all the time, so I took to a journal. And that was helpful for a little while, but then it got to the point where I realized that even though I was getting these emotions out, it was still me laying across my bed writing essentially to myself,
Yeah.
And so I started to share my thoughts, and just in conversation, it was recommended to me that perhaps I should write a book. And initially I was like, yeah, right. I even had a friend of mine that jokingly sent me a book cover that he designed. And I could probably find it because I keep everything. But he had made up a name for the book, and he's a graphic artist, so he had made up a picture. And I laughed at it. I said, dude, you're stupid, you're crazy. And so I laughed it off, and it wasn't until after the post-conviction hearing when the stress really began to mount again, because up until that, the media was still referring to me as Asia McClain, and no one knew what my current married last name was. And so after I testified, you know, during the PCR, I was not given the option to remain anonymous. And so once I testified, my name was everywhere. And then with the reports of the PCR, you know, everyone wanted to weigh in with their own personal opinions. And when you're not experienced with that kind of negative attention, it only amplifies your stress. And so I began to see accounts of my testimony and accounts of the situation that were completely misconstrued, things that were completely inaccurate. And not only did it upset me, but it lit a fire under me. And I was simultaneously introduced to a publishing company that was interested in my story, and so they gave me less than 2 months to turn that journal into a book.
Wow, that's a short turnaround time, yeah.
Yeah, and so you know, my husband, he is an entrepreneur, and at the time he was doing a lot of work from home, so he took care of the kids while I locked myself in our downstairs office and typed for 13 hours a day. And that's kind of how the book came about. Right.
Now, what's been the reaction to it, and what's also been like being a private person for so long, and now you're kind of out in public now? What's that been like?
The reaction for the book has been overall positive. I think that the book is it's not. You know, I didn't do a lot of background into the case, so I didn't dive into the whole experience because I don't know the whole experience. The book is about my experience, and my experience starts when Hay went missing. And so the book is more of a companion piece to the Serial podcast, if you will. And so the reaction has been positive in the sense that it gives another layer to the story. It clarifies a lot of the misconceptions, a lot of the things that I saw on the internet that were inaccurate. So for people who are really interested in the story as in its entirety, because you know how life is. You can have a situation go down, and you never are fully aware of all the little pieces that came together to make it to make it lay out the way that it did. And so there's a lot of that with this story. A lot of situations where something could have went left and it went right, if you know what I mean. Just for me being in the library that day, which was not something I normally did, I could have easily have not been there. And then this whole experience would have never happened. And so for people who are looking for that other layer, that Serial podcast and what actually happened together, and something that actually explains how those coincidental things or those things in the podcast that don't really make a bunch of sense, or like I said, some of the things that weren't even featured in the information that wasn't even featured in the podcast, because at the time I did not want to give Sarah permission to talk about that. You know, that the book, that's the purpose of the book, is to set the record straight and to just give that extra layer of context to this whole situation. So for people who have been really drawn in by the story and really hunger for the full perspective and all of the information, it's a great resource. And so I've gotten a lot of positive feedback. And of course, with any type of creative effort, you're going to get negative pushback as well. But that's normal. So I don't think it's any more. I don't think it's higher than say any other type of book. But because of the nature of the podcast and the story itself, you do get a few wacko birds. the first day that the book became available on Amazon, I got wind on Twitter that there was a whole group of individuals that hate me. They call them trolls. They conspired to go on Amazon at 12:01 a.m. as soon as the book was available and give it a bunch of one-star reviews. So, like the first 6 hours of the first day, there were probably about 7 to 12 different one-star reviews.
Wow.
But they were all unverified purchases from these people that just make it a point to hate me publicly. So,
imagine spending your time like
people
that.
actually started to read the book and post their own reviews, of course, that skewed things more accurately.
Right. Now, I saw one of the criticisms in those kind of one-star reviews is that, she's just, capitalizing off this murder and she's just trying to make a buck. But, that doesn't really make any sense to me because you have a right to your own experiences, whatever happens. You have a right to say your own story.
Exactly. And that's something that's so hurtful to me, and it's something that even after writing the book, like I said, when I started writing the journal and it first came to me, that, like I said, through my friend, the idea of writing the book, it wasn't something that I wanted anything to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And if it weren't for the encouragement of family and friends, it would have never come to fruition because, it was so hard to put myself out there like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that anyone would purposely do that for $1 is ridiculous to me. And so when I see comments like that, it is very hurtful to me, and it's something that I knew was going to happen just because of like I said, the nature of the podcast being so popular. But on the flip side, it's like, just because the podcast went viral, that doesn't take away from, like what you said, is my right to tell my story and tell it in the way that I see fit. A lot of people question me, why didn't you write a blog? You could have put it on a blog. To me, I don't see the internet as being permanent. A lot of people say the internet is forever. Once you put something on the internet, it's there forever. But I don't see it that way because, say I get a website and I put it all on my website or I put it all on my blog. If I stop paying my hosting, that goes away. And then the only living record of what I had to say is going to be in screenshots, or people's secondhand retelling of my story, and that's not what I wanted. I wanted it in a book. I wanted it in a hardcover. I wanted it to be something that's going to be on a library shelf 30, 50, 60 years from now, and if someone is interested in what happened to the people that I knew, and if someone is interested in knowing what it was like for me, I want them to be able to access that directly from me 60 years from now.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with that, yeah. So have you read or listened to the podcast of Rabia Chaudry does, Undisclosed, and have you read her book, The Adnan Story?
Unfortunately, I haven't, and it drives me crazy because I really do want to listen to it. But I know that there's a lot of information in there that I probably should not have swimming around in my head right now. And I don't know if there's any journalistic bias. I can only assume because she is a close family friend that there might be. And I'm trying my best to keep my opinions as non-biased and neutral as possible because it's kind of funny throughout this entire situation. Actually, hold on 1 second. I have toddlers. Give me 1 second.
You're fine.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I have a 2-year-old son. You may have heard in the background here, too, so I understand.
Yeah, I feel like that guy on BBC.
I know. I was just thinking of that guy. That's my life, basically.
Yeah, I'm literally walking around the house trying to run away from them this whole interview. So.
Yeah. My son was crying outside the door. Daddy, why are you on the phone?
But you were asking about the podcast and the book. What was I going to say? Throughout the whole experience leading up to the post-conviction hearing, and even since then, I have literally been made an enemy of the state of Maryland. And because of the way that they have regarded my testimony and treated me as a human being, I find myself feeling often very guarded in terms of integrity. When I wrote my book, I made it a point to have my attorney read my book before, because my goal in writing the book is not to damage my credibility, it's not to damage my integrity, but to merely find a way to express my feelings and my thoughts and my experience. And so I did not want to do anything that was going to, I always say, muddy the waters of justice. And so that would be the same type of issue or conflict of interest that I think listening to the other podcasts and reading Rabia's book would have. The last thing I would want is to actually be involved in a retrial and have it used against me that I've been somehow influenced by knowing information that's been presented in those sources. And so I make it a point to steer clear of that for now. I'm sure there's going to be a day at some point when I'm going to get caught up with everyone else in the world.
Right.
And it is extremely hard not to dive into those sources, but I think in the interest of justice, that is best that I ride the narrow path. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. That's good thinking. So we're getting near the hour mark, and I really appreciate you taking the time here. You've been very generous. I always ask this question at the end, what music have you been listening to lately?
What music? Besides Kids Bop? I really like Rihanna's Anti, but I can only listen to it in earphones, so, you know.
That's more of a personal experience.
That's what I'm rocking when I'm washing the dishes.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, my Pandora's a mess with having a 2-year-old son. Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Try when you have outdoor speakers and you find yourself running through sound system in the garage, like, no.
Right. Absolutely. Now, is there anything else I didn't ask you about that you want to get in here? Is there anything I didn't ask you about?
You didn't ask me where people can purchase the book.
Oh, go ahead. Plug.
Basically anywhere books are sold, but the primary sources would be on Amazon.com, and also I do have personalized or autographed copies available on my website, AsiaMcClain.com.
Cool. Well, I haven't read the book yet, but I really want to, and once I do, I'd love to talk to you again. And cool. Thank you so much for taking the time again, and you've been very generous with your time. So.
Alrighty. Well, you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. Bye.
If you enjoy this podcast, there are several ways to support it. I have a Patreon account, which can be found at www.patreon.com/Rob Burgess Show Patreon. I hope you'll consider supporting in any amount. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review the podcast everywhere it's available, which includes iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Facebook, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, and RSS. It really helps. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. Until next time.